Hello, Seiiti Arata. If you want to become smarter, what can you do? Well, maybe you can go to a bookstore and take a look at those latest bestsellers with the flashy covers. Wrong. Please do not do that. If you buy the current bestsellers, you're probably going to end up with superficial content from the popular influencers of the moment. Instead of that, I recommend starting with time-tested classics. The first book you should read is from 1921, and it is called The Intellectual Life. So that is book number 1. Take note, The Intellectual Life. The first book that I recommend is by Antonin-Gilbert Sertillanges, The Intellectual Life. It talks about dedicating your life to deep thought, to continuous learning. To truly embrace this journey, you need to have dedicated time for study, for reflection every single day. And it's not just about passively reading. You have to think deeply. Finding a quiet place is crucial. You need an environment where distractions are minimal so your thoughts can flow. This could be a specific little room in your house, could be a quiet corner in a library. Now the key here is consistency. This place should become the go-to spot daily for your intellectual activities to become part of your routine. Now, interestingly, studying should not be a solitary activity. You need to discuss ideas with peers, with mentors. This exchange of ideas not only clarifies your understanding, but also exposes you to different perspectives. And for these interactions to be fruitful, I'm going to give you 3 steps. Number 1, listen more than you speak, absorbing new ideas. Number 2, ask questions that deepen the conversation. And 3, share your reflections to get feedback. And what else? Taking care of your physical well-being also impacts your ability to think clearly. Regular exercise, a healthy diet, sufficient sleep all fuel your brain and will keep your mind sharp. Living an intellectual life is not a race. It's like a lifelong journey. It's something that you will need patience and perseverance. They are your allies in this journey of lifelong learning and discovery. However, all of this will be kind of useless if you don't know how to read. That's why now we're going to talk about a book called How to Read a Book. That's book number 2, How to Read a Book. This is the second book that I recommend, How to Read a Book by Mortimer Adler and Charles von Doren. In our intelligence training, I'll give you activities to put all of this into practice, and you can see everything at arata.se/intelligence. Well, the main lesson here from this book is that the reading is an active skill. And to truly understand, to remember what you read, you need to deeply engage with the text. Deeply engage. You have to start with a goal. Ask yourself, why are you reading this book? Are you looking for some specific information to just want to have a superficial idea? Or do you want to understand that book deeply? Knowing your goal will help you to read more effectively. And to deeply engage with any book, here are 3 tips. Number 1, preview. Just skim the book first. Look at the table of contents, read the introduction, take a quick look at a few chapters. This will give you a map of what to expect. Then number 2, ask questions while you read. Who, what, when, where, why, how. All of this will keep you active when you are trying to engage with the material. Number 3, summarize each chapter using your own words after reading. This will reinforce what you learned and will help you to remember better. You need to have critical reading. Please do not accept everything as absolute truth just because it's in a book. You have to evaluate the arguments of the author. Stay until the end, because this is related to the 5th book I will be recommending you by Carl Sagan. Basically, you have to ask, are these ideas logical? what is the evidence? Discussing the book with other people will also deepen your understanding. It will expose you to different points of view, to questions you might have not considered. So think of reading as a conversation that you're having with the author. Reading is not just moving your eyes across the page. It is about thinking and questioning. With practice, you can read any book more effectively, and also you can gain more from that experience. And as you read, you should also take notes. That's why now we're going to use a few ideas from Umberto Eco. This is book number 3. Write it down. How to Write a Thesis. This is the third book. How to Write a Thesis by Umberto Eco. It is a must-read if you're planning to write a thesis or any major research project. But it's also useful for your simple notes as you do your daily reading. Of course, you can make life easier by choosing a topic that you're passionate about. This is going to keep you motivated, and then you can start your research. You're going to make a list of the sources that you need to check. This will be including books, articles, websites, and then you take detailed notes as you go. Write down interesting ideas, where you found these ideas. Organize your notes into categories. This will help you to see what you have and what is missing. You have to get good at drafting. Don't seek perfection on the first try. Just start writing. Make an outline. An outline is like a skeleton of the main ideas, how one idea is connected to the other. Then you're going to be later adding more substance to each point, one at a time. And then you get feedback to make sure that you are on the right track. When you feel a bit lost or stuck, well, that is normal. When that happens, take a step back. Just review your work, review your plan. When you understand the teachings of Umberto Eco, you're not just qualified to write a thesis, but you can also write simpler things like the small notes that you're going to be taking when you are reading books. Notice what we are reading, what we're doing so far here. You've learned to live an intellectual life, which requires you to read books. And reading requires being able to write something about it. But writing itself requires a specific skill, to have style. That's why now we're going to go to the 4th book called The Elements of Style. You can't just write in a random way, in a low-quality manner. The Elements of Style by William Strunk and Elwyn Brooks, it will be showing you this is the guide that you need to write clearly, effectively. The first thing you have to remember is to be concise. So cut the unnecessary words. This makes your writing stronger, clearer, clean. For example, instead of saying, he's a man who blah, 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 you can just say, he, blah, blah, blah. Next, always use active voice. It is more direct, it's lively. Instead of writing, the meeting was led by so-and-so, you can just say, so-and-so led the meeting. Sounds much better. Use specific language instead of a vague description. Choose words that will paint a more clear picture instead of saying, wow, that was cool. Cool, why? Why was it nice? You can say, I don't know, elegant, if that's what you mean. It becomes more specific, more clear, easier to understand. Not that we're using the intellectual life to inspire you, how to read a book for research, and then a combination of how to write a thesis and the elements of style for your note-taking. Let's think more clearly. Here, Carl Sagan will help us. And this is book number 5, The Demon-Haunted World. Now, I recommend this, The Demon-Haunted World by Carl Sagan. It is a great book. See, to be able to think clearly and become smarter, you also need critical thinking. And there is a specific kind of thinking. It is the scientific thinking, scientific method. It works like this. You're going to observe something, you're going to create a theory about it, and then you need to test your theory with experiments, and then you see if your results match your hypothesis, what you thought that would happen. If yes, great. If not, you can go back to square one. You have to question everything. Don't accept things as they are without questioning. Every time you hear a claim, your first attitude should be asking, and what is the evidence? If there is no good evidence, maintain a healthy dose of skepticism. You also need to recognize when you are deceiving yourself. Because in your brain, there are biases. There are ways that you can be wrong when you think. So when you're thinking about a particular problem or a claim, always check. Are you being influenced by your own desires to be true, your beliefs, instead of solid evidence? Knowledge is power. The more you know, the less likely you are to be fooled by smooth talk, by fake science. So keep learning about everything. And as you can see, sometimes you can't trust your own thinking, right? This is where Daniel Kahneman can help us. That's book number 6, Thinking Fast and Slow. Finally, I recommend Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. This book will be explaining that you have 2 systems in your brain. You have system 1, which is fast, intuitive, emotional, and we have system 2, slower, more deliberate, more logical. Understanding how these 2 systems work together will make you smarter and also will help you to make better decisions. First of all, what you need to know is when system 1 is taking over. System 1 is quick. You often jump to immediate conclusions. This is good enough for everyday decisions like what you're going to eat for breakfast, but not good for bigger, more complex decisions. For those, you're going to need system 2. But here's the thing. Using system 2 will require effort and energy. You also need to recognize when you are deceiving yourself. In your brain, there are biases. There are ways that you might be wrong when you're thinking. For example, there is something that Kahneman calls confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is when you look for information that will be supporting what you already believe, and it will be ignoring whatever contradicts your beliefs. That is a trap that can lead you to make bad decisions because you're not seeing the whole picture. Another key idea is the planning fallacy. You tend to underestimate how long it's going to be taking you to complete a task. You think you can do things faster than you really can. And this can lead to missed deadlines and stress. So what can you do about it? You can start by thinking about similar tasks that you've done before. How long did they take? You can use this information to make a more realistic plan. Understanding these systems and biases doesn't happen overnight. It will require time and effort. But being aware of them is the first step. The next time you're about to make a decision, just pause for a moment. Ask for yourself, is this system 1 or system 2 type of thing? Is there a bias at play here? Taking that pause, that moment, can make all the difference. To become smarter, use these tips from classic books every day. Set aside a little bit of time to think deeply and study, just like the intellectual life suggests. And then when you're reading, ask questions, summarizing your own words. That's a tip from How to Read Books. Break down big writing tasks into smaller steps. Keep refining your work. This idea will come from how to write the thesis. Then you have to also write clearly, in a simple way. That is a lesson from The Elements of Style. Question what you hear, what you see. Use this scientific method from The Demon-Haunted World. Know when to trust your gut and also when to stop and think more. From Thinking Fast and Slow. When you're combining all these tips, it will sharpen your thinking and will help you to communicate better. If you really want to acquire these skills, you can start by visiting the link arata.se/intelligence.